I think I'm gonna make it all the way. You hurt me and abused me, took advantage of and used me. I swear it almost made a wreck of me. When I needed your devotion, you were never in the notion. You were cold as any iceberg in the sea. Love to you had lost its splendor. My pride went out the window, but now my heart is healing, and I got a real good feeling. I think I'm gonna make it all the way. It had been over a year since my wife started her affair with Howard Paddington. I had no idea why I allowed it to go on as long as I did. Perhaps it was because I was comfortable. After I figured out what was happening, I didn't really care anymore. I patiently waited for the day when she would serve me with divorce papers. I hadn't done anything to prepare myself other than to get into the proper frame of mind. I was resigned to the fact that she would take half of everything I had accumulated with her. She could gladly have the house and furniture. The appraised value was less than the mortgage now. We had just enough money saved to prepay 4 years of college for our daughter, Jenny. In 3 more years, I would have vested rights with the company, and she would probably claim part of that. Marcia was fairly discreet about her affair. The biggest problem was that Paddington worked for the same company that I did. He was in a different department and at 1 pay grade higher. At least he was single and fairly good-looking. What I didn't like was his arrogant attitude. It was easy for me to avoid him at work, and the only time I was forced into associating with him was at company social affairs. Things came to a head quite quickly. Jenny had left for her first semester at Penn State, and Marcia and I were alone in the house for the first time in 18 years. Normally, that would have been a good opportunity for a couple to start increasing their sexual activities, but not in our house. Marcia was always too tired or too busy, and I couldn't care less. It was a Saturday morning. Marcia was in the shower, and I was still reading the morning paper when the phone rang. I was not expecting a call, so I just let it go to the message machine. It was an interesting message, to say the least. "This is Malcolm Jewelers calling. The engraving has been finished on your watch, and you can pick it up at any time. Thank you." Well, that was interesting. I don't wear a watch, and I never had. It bothered the hell out of me to have something hanging on my arm. There was no reason for Marcia to have something engraved on her own watch, and Jenny used her cell phone to check the time. I had never been one to root through my wife's purse or anything else, but today I felt a strong urge. The receipt from the jewelry store was tucked in the side where she kept her credit cards. I read it carefully. 1 Teg Heuer Carrera wristwatch with a black alligator band. Engraving on the rear, "Forever Marcia, $3,900, paid in full." I carefully tucked it back in place and got myself a cold beer. I knew damn well that it was not for me. Marcia had just returned to the living room as I was walking outside to start mowing the lawn. It took twice as long as normal to finish the yard work, but I had a good chance to think things through. After lunch, Marcia informed me that she was going to spend the night at her sister's house in Frackville. She didn't notice the big smile on my face. I got to spend the rest of the evening getting my affairs in order. I had a whole year to do this, but I had waited until the last minute. I was kicking myself for delaying it, but was glad that I had finally made the decision. She got home about lunchtime on Sunday. We were congenial but hardly spoke to each other. It was the longest Sunday of my life. I slept on the couch that night. Monday morning at work started out fine until Howard started showing off his new watch to all of his workmates. I had resigned myself to put up with it all until he glanced my way with a big smirk on his face. Up until that point, he had always been laid back and quiet about the affair, but now he was gloating. Big mistake. I immediately took a week's vacation and then notified personnel that I was now available for a transfer to the Baltimore office. The new job came with a promotion and a pay raise. I had declined it several times because Marcia and Jenny did not want to move. I spent the rest of the day at the bank and with my lawyer. I put together an offer to give Marcia everything, but no alimony and no percentage of my pending pension. She could have all the money that was left after we prepaid Jenny's tuition. With college costs as high as they were, there was not going to be much left. My wife was not at home when I moved all of my things into a small, efficient apartment near work. On Tuesday, I rested. The divorce papers were delivered to Marcia on Wednesday. She called me. "John, do you want to explain this? Do you want to discuss anything?" "No," I replied. "Why should I sign these papers?" she asked. "Marcia, it is long overdue and you know it. Signing the papers will just make everything right. I am the one getting the short end of the stick. You lose nothing and gain everything." "You are offering no support. I gave you 20 years and you offer nothing," she replied. "If I included alimony, it would only be until you remarried. Seemed to me that it would be a waste of time. As it is, everything will be over in 90 days. If you want to change things, I can guarantee that it will take over a year. I just want to move on." "I understand that you are actually moving?" "Oh, and who told you that?" Of course, I knew the answer. "Does it matter?" I replied. "At this point, no." There was a pause in the conversation. "Marcia, I am the one who got hurt here. I am the one who is being forced to move. I did nothing wrong, and still I am the one being punished. I've known all about Paddington for several years now. Just sign the damn papers." "I am sorry, John. I never meant for this to happen. I will get them to the lawyers tomorrow," she replied. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to lay a guilt trip on her, but I refused to give her the satisfaction. I went into work on Friday and cleaned out my desk. Nobody had expected to see me, and several people voiced their objections at not being able to set up a proper goodbye party. I wasn't in a party mood. It took less than an hour to out-process. Before leaving, I called Jenny and explained the situation as well as I could. "How do you tell your daughter that you are leaving her mother without giving a good reason?" She asked once, and then dropped the matter as if she had some idea of what was going on. I didn't see how it would have been possible for her not to know, since it was for so long. I got the feeling that she understood. The drive to Baltimore was a sad one. All I could think about was the life that Marcia and I had built, and how easily it was destroyed. I had always planned on growing old with her. Now I had no plans for growing old. I didn't really care. At no point had Marcia apologized for her actions or even admitted them. We avoided the subject. Naturally, we both knew what was going on, but neither of us would be the first to actually bring it up. A man could drive himself nuts thinking about all of this crap. I turned on the radio. Who the hell is Lady Gaga? The new job was a piece of cake. I was overqualified to say the least. Because of my competence and confidence, the people under me felt comfortable. It was going to be a good move. I kept in touch with Jenny, and she gave me what information that she had about her mother. Howard had moved in with Marcia into our house. A week after I left. Jenny was not happy, and I couldn't blame her. Marcia had signed and agreed to all the terms on the divorce. She didn't even get her own lawyer. Everything was right on schedule, and all I could do now was wait. When we reached the point where there was only 3 weeks left until the divorce would be final, I signed up for a 10-day Caribbean cruise. I hated cruises, but this one would be necessary. The weekend before I was scheduled to leave, I met some old friends from home in Atlantic City. I wined them, dined them, and entertained them. It was good to have old friends. It was a long 10 days at sea. I couldn't decide what I hated most, the food or the others' guests. At times, I could swear that I was being stalked by at least 3 single women. At least I thought they were single. I took advantage of all of the ports of call to break up the tedium. When I finally got back home, I had some guests waiting. They were Baltimore detectives, but they were there at the request of the Pennsylvania State Police. Howard Paddington's body had been found at a roadside rest area on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. He had been beaten by what appeared to be a baseball bat and died on the way to a local hospital. His wallet and watch had been taken, so the first indication was that it had been a robbery gone bad. When investigators uncovered the relationship between Paddington and Marcia, I became the prime suspect. It took less than 30 minutes for the local police to verify that I was indeed on the cruise for the last 10 days. The Pennsylvania State Police did not feel that any further research was necessary. There were at least a dozen messages on my phone. Jenny had told her mother about my cruise plans, but Marcia insisted on trying to get in touch with me. Marcia knew that I hated cruises. One of the calls was from Jenny, so I called her back. "Jenny, I just got back from my cruise. What the heck happened?" "Nobody knows for sure. Mom is a wreck. Howard didn't come home from work one day, and that night they found him on the turnpike near Downingtown. He had been beaten and died before they could get him to the hospital." "When did this happen?" "Last Thursday," she replied. "Well, I was in Cancun last Thursday, so it wasn't me. Mom swears that you had something to do with it, but there is no proof at all to verify it," she answered. "I just spent a good bit of time with the local police here, and they seemed to be satisfied with my story." "So why is your mother trying to get in touch with me?" "She is totally lost. She doesn't have you, and now she has lost Howard. She said something about trying to stop the divorce. Can she do that?" "Not without my approval. If I had waited a few more days, I wouldn't be having this problem." The next week was filled with phone calls from Marcia and from an attorney named Winstead. I ignored them all. 2 days before the divorce would be final, a certified letter arrived requiring my signature. My secretary was able to delay the delivery so that I had a chance to exit the building. I spent the next 3 days in Atlantic City. Before going home, I called my lawyer. He congratulated me on successfully avoiding Marcia's attempts to stop the divorce and then asked me for $10,000 more to cover expenses. After a few awkward moments, he started to laugh. It was a crappy little joke, but it did add a little levity to the situation. Instead of the money, he said he would settle for a steak dinner. It was worth it. I still thought it was a crappy joke. I never fully understood why the police had dropped the investigation into Paddington's murder or why they had not contacted me again. Jenny called and also offered some congratulations, but of course with the reserve that a child would have in seeing her parents separate. Marcia was in a deep depression. Her sister Sherry was staying with her for the time being. It appeared that she suddenly realized that she was going to be having financial problems. Severe financial problems. I was smiling as I hung up the phone. I had no contact with Marcia for the next 2 years. I didn't keep track of her or check up on what she was doing. I talked to Jenny every month, but we both carefully avoided any discussion about Marcia. All I knew was that she had lost the house to the bank and was working in a ladies' clothing store at one of the local malls. Marcia did tell Jenny that Howard had 2 insurance policies naming his mother as beneficiary. Apparently, Mother Paddington was not willing to share. I had had a few dinner dates, but nothing of a romantic or sexual nature. Later that year, Jenny announced that she was getting married in June. I had met the guy several times and was very comfortable with her choice. The wedding was going to be in Harrisburg, his hometown. Of course, Dad was going to be footing most of the bill. I was more than willing to help in any way that I could. The prospective groom had far more family than our side, so it all made sense. I agreed to go and give away the bride if Jenny could assure me that I would not be seated near Marcia or have to socialize with her in any manner. She reluctantly agreed. I did not want to ruin my daughter's wedding, but I felt that if I was forced to have contact with Marcia, the chance of a disruption was more likely than if I simply avoided her. Other than getting a tux, there was one more thing that I had to do to prepare for the wedding. I was feeling devilish. Or should I say, my mean streak erupted. It was a beautiful wedding. Aren't they all? Jenny kept her word. Things were carefully arranged so that Marcia and I could avoid each other without appearing too obvious. Although I was alone, Marcia was escorted by a good-looking fellow who was about 50 years old. I never did find out what the relationship between them was. He could have been a working associate, a neighbor, or her new boyfriend. I didn't really care. At the reception, Marcia and her escort were seated at the far left side of the head table, and I was on the far right. I patiently waited until it came time for the father of the bride to offer a toast. As I stood up to speak, I crossed my fingers. It was a silly little prank, but I still wanted it to go off as I planned it. I am right-handed, but today I was holding the glass in my left hand. The words coming from my mouth were unimportant, but my gesture to the room was. As I raised my left arm, my tuck sleeve slid down, exposing a beautiful Teg Heuer wristwatch with a black alligator band. I held my arm up longer than necessary so that the exquisite timepiece could be seen by everyone in the room. A sudden gasp from the far end of the table told me that my mission had been accomplished. I spoke a little longer than I normally would have, just to rub it in a little. When I sat down, I had a big grin on my face. Marcia had seen the watch and she had recognized it. All the planning had paid off. A few minutes later, I saw my ex-wife and her escort leave the room. She was upset, but I couldn't tell if she was crying or not. I hung around for another hour like a dutiful father, and then quietly left and went back to my hotel room. I slept uneasily that night. I wasn't sure what Marcia would do, or if she would do anything. If she did nothing, then I would know that she was resigned to her fate and ready to move on. If she was still bitter about what happened, I might be getting some visitors. The answer came at 6 a.m. "Mr. John Terrell?" There were two of them, in dark suits. I got a sudden vision of Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones on Independence Day. I was laughing to myself as I answered. "Yes. How can I help you?" The dominant suit identified himself and his partner and then asked to come in. They were not local, but from the state attorney's office. I was wondering who got them out of bed this early in the morning. I motioned for them to sit as I put my pants on. I had expected them and I should have been dressed before they got here. There were only 2 chairs in the hotel room, so I sat on the unmade bed. I purposely took more time than necessary to get comfortable. "What can I help you with, gentlemen?" I asked. "You are the John Terrell who was at the Peterson-Terrell wedding yesterday?" "Of course. Jenny Terrell. Now Peterson is my daughter," I replied. "We received a call that during the reception you were wearing an expensive Teg Heuer watch." I reached over to the nightstand and picked up the oversized timepiece. "Yes, I was wearing this watch. Do you like it?" "That's not important, Mr. Terrell. What we would like to know is where you got the watch." "Why?" I asked. "Can you just answer the question?" "No. You tell me why you want to know where I got it and who informed you that I had it, and I will answer your questions." "Mr. Terrell, we are trying to make this as easy as possible. Could you just answer the question?" "Okay. I got the watch on eBay. Now you tell me why you want to know." "A watch exactly like the one you are holding was taken off of the body of a man killed in Downingtown 3 years ago. I am sure that there are a lot of watches similar to this one. Can you be a little more specific?" I asked. They were a little uncomfortable. I got the feeling that they were getting ready to just drag me off to a government building someplace to finish the conversation. "Mr. Terrell, do you know a man named Howard Paddington?" "Of course I do. I used to work with him, and he is the man who had an affair with my wife, which incidentally caused my divorce." "Mr. Paddington had a watch exactly like that when he was killed." "How do you know that?" I asked. There was no reply from my 2 visitors. "Did he have the watch on him when he was found?" I asked. Both of them shook their heads no in unison. "Do you think that this might be his watch?" I asked. They were supposed to be in control of this informal interrogation, but it looked as if they were losing it. "Who the hell told you that this was Howard Paddington's watch?" I asked. "Your wife, Mr. Terrell. Your wife identified the watch." "And how did she know that this was his watch?" I asked. There was a slight hesitation. "She claimed that she bought it for him." "Maybe you should be talking to her?" I asked. There was no reply. "That's it? That is all you have to go on?" I asked. "There is an engraving on the back of the watch that will verify her claim." "Can she prove that she bought this watch?" I asked. "She had a receipt." "Hell, I have a receipt also. Here, let me show you." They sat quietly as I removed a folded piece of paper from my wallet and handed it to them. The top guy looked from the paper to me. This is from eBay. It says here that you bought the watch for $49. Yeah, but I had to pay $5 for shipping also. You bought a Teg Heuer watch on eBay for $49? Not exactly. Look close at the description, I replied. They were both looking at the description and did not notice the big grin on my face. It says Tig Heuer, not Teg Heuer. Here, look at the face of the watch. Suit number 2 studied the watch face carefully as I held it out to him. He turned to his partner. It says Tig Heuer. Gentlemen, did my wife buy a Teg Heuer watch for Mr. Paddington, or did she buy a Tig Heuer watch for him? A look of frustration came over both of their faces. Things were not going as they had planned. Can we see the back of the watch, Mr. Terrell? You want to check the engraving? I asked. Yes. Do you mind? No, not at all. I handed them the watch so that they could examine it at their leisure. I had made my point. I was putting on my shirt when they both got up to leave. Sorry for the inconvenience, Mr. Terrell. Have a safe trip home. I closed the door after they left and looked down at the watch. I was glad that I had spent the extra $20 to have the back of the watch engraved. I flipped it over and had a laugh as I read the Old English script. Eat shit and die. It would have been just as easy for them to check the serial number of the watch, but there wouldn't have been nearly as much fun in that. I drove back to Baltimore, knowing that my wife was still bitter about how I had handled the situation. I guess I can't blame her, but I was hoping that there would have been a little remorse on her part. I was upset because she was still looking to hurt me or to get even. She was the one who cheated, not me. Maybe it was about time for me to get even. I threw the Tig Heuer watch out of the car window and reached into the glove compartment. You could tell the difference just by the feel. Before fastening the real thing on, I read the inscription for the 1,000th time. Forever, Marcia. I hated wearing a watch, but maybe I could get used to wearing this one. I'm gonna make it all the way, just like old Blue Eyes said. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.